Chapter 8 is a pivotal chapter in that you will learn the four-step hypothesis testing process, which is fundamentally what this class is all about. You learn the conceptual foundation for the four-step hypothesis testing process in chapters 1 through 7. The four steps are shown on the slide and provide a framework that allows us to methodically lay out our logic and approach to testing a hypothesis about how a treatment will affect a sample. We will discuss each step in detail on the following slides, but generally, in the first step, we lay out our hypothesis, always beginning with a null hypothesis, which we may supplement with a research or alternative hypothesis. In the next step, we select decision criteria, which allows us to determine if our treated sample mean is far enough away from the population mean that we can consider it statistically significant. During the third step, we compute a test statistic. In Chapter 8, we will practice that third step by computing the sample statistic using the z-score formula you learned in Chapter 7. Finally, in Step 4, depending on the results of the test statistic, we conclude that our treatment did have a statistically significant effect or that it didn't. This figure 8.2, which is on page 206 in your text, shows the structure of the research study from the point of view of the hypothesis test. The original population before treatment is shown on the left-hand side. The unknown population after treatment is shown on the right-hand side. Note that the unknown population is actually hypothetical. The treatment is never administered to the entire population. Instead, we are asking, what if the treatment were administered to the entire population? However, we do have a real sample that has received the treatment, and we will use this sample to evaluate a hypothesis about the unknown population mean. The purpose of research is to determine the effect of the treatment on the individuals in the population. That is, the goal is to determine what happens to the population after the treatment is administered. So as we go forward, very important to keep in mind is that we always hypothesize about populations. Before we get into our detailed examination of the four steps of the hypothesis testing process, I like to begin with an analogy. Probably most of you have, at some point, watched a legal drama on TV or perhaps have been part of a legal proceeding in court. In this country, our legal system is based on the premise that the defendant is considered innocent until the evidence shows, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty. The four-step hypothesis testing process you are learning is based on that same logic. We start by stating in our null hypothesis that nothing is going to happen. The treatment is not going to have an effect. When we compute our test statistic and compare it to our decision criteria, it may constitute sufficient evidence for us to conclude that our treatment did have an effect. In other words, the defendant is guilty. A hypothesis test is a formalized procedure that follows a standard series of operations. In this way, researchers have a standardized method for evaluating the results of their research studies. Other researchers will recognize and understand exactly how the data were evaluated and how conclusions were reached. To emphasize the formal structure of a hypothesis test, we will present hypothesis testing as a four-step process that is used throughout the rest of the book.